Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to an album ranking for Bad Company, one of the first supergroups featuring members from Free, Mott The Hoople, King Crimson. They had two distinct eras and three different singers throughout their career, releasing a total of 12 studio albums, of which I will do a ranking of all 12 of their albums. So stick around for that. We'll get into it here in just a bit, but if you are new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things do help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by turning on notifications, you'll never miss an episode and stay up to date on really cool things like this with a Bad Company album ranking. So obviously with the passing of Mick Ralphs recently, original guitar player for Bad Company coming from Mott The Hoople, I pulled out all my Bad Company and was giving a listen to not only that era but all the different eras of the band, because Mick Ralphs was part of that. It was Paul Rodgers that was in and out at different times. But in full disclosure here, I did grow up with Bad Company in the 80s. I do love the Brian Howe era of the band. But then, of course, grew to love Paul Rodgers in the original era just as much. And when the 90s rolled around and they changed singers again to Robert Hart, I also was on board for all of that. So with that said, let's get started in this ranking here. Now, coming in at number 12, Fame and Fortune from 1986, seventh studio album and reunion album. So this one here was their first one following Rough Diamonds. That album had come out, I think it was 1982, so 4 years earlier. Last one with Paul Rodgers. Didn't really go over all that well, or, gangbusters or whatever kind of a thing, sort of dying without a whimper. And then the band returns with this, and unfortunately, it too doesn't really set off the charts or anything of that nature. Luckily though, they didn't give up at this point and they keep moving forward. This of course was the first one with Brian Howe when they reunited, and even though it lists Boz Burrell as the bassist on here, he does not play on the album. So kind of wasn't really a reunion at this point, just having Simon Kirke, Mick Ralphs at that point. But it's a solid album, but it doesn't really blow me away or do anything the way that later albums would do or the earlier stuff did. So this one here is just one that I've reached for many different times, try to get into it, and it's just never moved me. All right, coming in at number 11, Stories Told and Untold, 1996, 12th and final studio album that they would do. But this one here a little different than all the other studio albums that we're going to talk about, because this one here, not only is it featuring Robert Hart, their third and final different vocalist, I guess if we'll call it that, but it was a mix of 7 new original songs and 7 re-recording of past classic songs, those being from the Paul Rodgers era. Robert Hart had much more of that soulful bluesy voice, so he was perfect for bringing those songs out. And this was in the era when MTV Unplugged and all that stuff was popular. So while not fully an unplugged album, it is or does have more of the acoustic instrumentation on it. And I really like the new stuff that's on here, but I don't think they really did service to the older stuff, although it was nice at the time to get it. So it's not one that I reach for all that often. I like hearing the new stuff, don't really care for hearing the re-recorded old stuff at this point, and it just becomes one of those albums that's kind of the outlier, but not a bad album, just again, not one that I reach for all that often. Okay, coming in at number 10, Rough Diamonds from 1982, 6th studio album, last to feature the original lineup of the group before they would break up. It'd also be the last album that Paul Rodgers records with the band, even though he later does return to the band and rides it out for another 30 years with the group, essentially. They never record another studio album together after this. So this is the last point of which Paul Rodgers makes an album. Yes, they do record a few new songs here and there once Rodgers gets back, but last full-length album. Opening track on this, Electric Land, is a fantastic, classic-sounding Bad Company song, but the rest of the album really kind of falls flat, doesn't hold up. It sounds to me like it's an odds and sods style record. I know it's not. It was a full-on real album that was put together, but it just doesn't flow like a cohesive album. And so not one that gets talked about all that often, and not one that gets listened to, by me at least, all that often. Okay, coming in at number 9, Here Comes Trouble from 1992, 10th studio album, and last one with Brian Howe. He would decide to leave at this point because he felt like he was doing all the writing and not really getting the respect for having done all of that with it. And so he leaves the group. Not really sure how that served either parties for him to leave, because he was doing all the work and then he doesn't really do anything after it. But I guess he decided that that was all he needed at that point. It's a good album, some solid, strong songs that came off of it. How about that? And this could be the one. Problem is, the rest of the album doesn't really stand up the way those two songs do. So it's a good, solid effort. It's kind of middle of the road, AOR, melodic rock. It's what the band was doing at that time. Less of the bluesy hard rock of the original Bad Company, but that was the era and that was what Bad Company was doing at that time. So still a good album, but again, just not one that really gets reached for too much. All right, coming in at number 8, we have Burning Sky from 1977, 4th studio album. This one here, a bit more subtle of the Paul Rodgers era albums. It's not quite as in your face as some of the other ones are, but the title track, Burning Sky, is just absolutely a burner. Every time that thing comes on, I absolutely love it. And it always leads me off to believe this album is going to kick my ass, but it never really does. And it's unfortunate that the overall rest of the album isn't as memorable as that opening track. I still like the album. I still enjoy the album. But again, man, I just always want more and more of that opening track on it because it's so good. Okay, coming in at number 7, we have Straight Shooter from 1975, 2nd studio album, recorded only 3 months after the debut album was released. And it really shows that the band was firing on all cylinders at this point, being able to make 2 albums in succession like that, so closely together, and still sound as good as they do, and having stand out all-time classic songs on here like Feel Like Making Love and Shooting Star certainly show the quality of music that they were able to come up with at that time. For me, though, the album jumps around to a number of different styles. It is nowhere near as cohesive as the debut album. And so it, for me, kind of has that sophomore slump. I know the album was hugely successful and a lot of people absolutely love this album, but with songs like Weep No More, that was just very, very bluesy and not like the rest of the blues hard rock sound of this album. And Anna, which is almost soulful and a gospel style song on here, for me, it breaks the flow. And again, I just don't reach for it all that often. All right, coming in at number 6, Dangerous Age, 1988, their 8th studio album, follow-up to Fame and Fortune from 86. And when that one didn't take off, luckily they made this album, but they switched gears. They brought in Terry Thomas, a producer who had been part of the band, Charlie. And they also, with Brian Howe, Terry Thomas writing all the stuff together in here, that's where things really took off in the more AOR melodic rock sound instead of the bluesy hard rock sound that we know Bad Company for. But then they began to have hits with this stuff, and that really starts the new era of Bad Company. Great standout tracks like No Smoke Without Fire and Shake It Up. I still go back to this. It was my introduction to the band. My older brother had this album, and I loved it at the time, and I still love it today, even if it is different than the original era of the band. All right, coming in at number 5, Company of Strangers from 1995, 11th studio album and first to feature then new vocalist Robert Hart, taken over for Brian Howe. The band also expanded to a 5-piece at this time, adding second guitar player Dave Colwell. The album right before this it was a trio at that point. So they're really adding both bassist and second guitar player at this point. But they were really trying to make it more of a band effort, allowing everyone to write and that sort of stuff. Whereas before it was really the Terry Thomas, Brian Howe show, right? So this here was supposed to be returning the band to form. And in that regard, it does. It's much more bluesy and soulful like the original Bad Company. It rocks hard. And that was a great move for the 90s, but unfortunately, with it being the 90s, it just didn't catch on. But I still think that this was a fantastic album. And had it been released back in the 70s, I think we would be talking about this album differently than we do today. All right, coming in at number 4, Holy Water from 1990, ninth studio album and arguably biggest and best album with Brian Howe. This is the one that really set the band apart from the Paul Rodgers era, meaning that prior to this, the band was really living in the shadow of the Paul Rodgers era. But by this album here, they had proven that they could have hits on their own and stand apart from that. And it's really what set up the two different eras of the band. The more radio friendly, pop friendly, whatever you want to call it, of the melodic rock era from the 80s and into the 90s versus the 70s era of the band when they were the bluesy hard rock band. Not that they didn't do that stuff on these albums, but it really did separate where they were in terms of but it built on the previous album, Dangerous Age. It just had less of that 80s sound in it. And focusing more back onto the rock sound. And again, that's where I say this really set the band apart, and with this album cemented a whole entire other era of the band. And this is one I still reach for today. All right, we're down to the top 3 here. So coming in at number 3, Running with the Pack, 1976, third studio album. And this one here is super consistent from start to finish. It's one of my absolute favorite sounding albums from the band, kicking off with a killer opening track, Live for the Music. There's an excellent rocker in Honey Child on here. And of course, you've got the stellar title track on this thing. All stuff on it that just makes this album rock through and through, which is really good. But for me, it's actually the last track on this album, Fade Away, that I think should have been an amazing hit off of this. I don't know why it wasn't, but it seals the deal, making this album as great as it is, and why, at least for me, this album comes in at number 3. All right, maybe a little bit controversial on this pick here, but I love this album. So coming in at number 2, Desolation Angels, 1979, fifth studio album. So the controversial aspect, not as popular as some of those earlier albums. It did do better than Burning Sky from 77. It returns the band to the charts. I think it's got amazing songs on it. It's got the mega hit Rock and Roll Fantasy on here, but also Gone, 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 Oh Atlanta. And it's just a really consistent album. And for me, a lot of times that's what makes an album great, is how consistent an album is from start to finish on it. Do I like all of the songs, even the deep cuts? Well, that's what this is. And that's why for me, this comes in at number 2. All right, and number 1, I don't think this one here is any surprise to anyone. A little bit surprised to me, though, in the end of the day, that I didn't go with something else. But when I gave a re-listen to all the albums here to do the ranking, this one still comes in at number 1, and I'm talking about the self-titled debut album from 1974. So this one here is an absolute perfect album if there ever was one. And all of those kind of shows, top 10 best albums ever, perfect albums, whatever. This one easily could always be part of it. It hasn't been part of any of my episodes yet, but then there's just so many great albums out there. But this is one of those great albums, and having big hits on it like Can't Get Enough, Ready for Love, Bad Company, the title track. And I've always loved that this album was band titled Bad Company, the album titled Bad Company, and the killer song, Bad Company. So a triple threat, if you will, there for you in that title. But this one here really sets the template for the blues, hard rock sound that bands are going to be doing going forth after this. Free started it, Bad Company cemented it, and going forward, that's who all imitators are compared to. But what a great album this is from start to finish on this thing. There's no filler on this album. Even the deep cuts on this thing are really, really good. So at least for me, in my opinion, it is the best Bad Company record and a perfect album at that too. So there you go. All 12 albums from Bad Company ranked for you guys. Weigh in, let me know which is your favorite Bad Company album. What do you think of the 3 different singers? I know there's always going to be the diehard Paul Rodger fans, and you're going to have the middle ones with the Brian Howe, but I really like Robert Hart. So there you go. Weigh in, let me know, but hopefully you enjoyed this album ranking for Bad Company. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.